Good morning and welcome. My name is Jean Nametz, and I am the Director of Religious Education at the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood. As always, a big thank you to the team today and always that helps bring services to life each Sunday. For over a century, the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood has been gathering in community as a home for liberal faith and free thinking. Now, as much as ever, we need communities like this that believe in the interdependence of humanity, in the power of love, and in the holy spark of every single person. Here in this community, we celebrate each person, whatever their gender, sexual orientation, age, education, history, race, ethnicity, economic status, physical or mental health, or theology. If this is your first time visiting one of our Sunday services, we are so glad you found us this morning, and welcome. Please consider staying for our virtual coffee hour. It's a great way to connect with small groups of folks. And if you'd like to learn more about us, please fill out the Google form that will be dropped into the chat or email our office at 113cottage@gmail.com or visit our website, uuridgewood.org. Also, for those folks who are new, after services today, we will have a coffee hour in a special breakout room just for newcomers. And I'll give clear instructions, or Reverend Sarah will, after the service on how to participate in that. Now, Jeff has a quick message about the raffle.
Okay, good. Good morning. For those of you that have been living in a vacuum, we are running a raffle, as you know, with an attempt to try to cover the shortfall in our budget from the loss of not being able to do the annual service auction or have rentals to our facility. And so it's a fairly large raffle. So let me just update you where we stand. Number one, we are up to 581 tickets sold. So that's $58,100. And I'm going to assume there's probably another 10 or so that I'm still waiting on checks for. So we're getting close to that $60,000 mark. We only did 65 tickets this week. And the reason why is that there's probably 13 or 14 of us who have made a really concerted effort to reach out to others. And I'm not going to name names other than myself. So I'll give you my example. We're tapped out. I have sold 37 tickets right now. And I probably have another one or two that are in the works, but I've done my reaching out and I can't reach out to anybody else. However, we have over 100 people that haven't done that. They have not bought tickets for themselves, for their family, but more importantly, they haven't taken the step of reaching out to their contact list and just saying, hey guys, we're offering this. Do you want to participate? So my ask is that you drop your discomfort that you may have and understand that a lot of people are more than willing to say, hey, I'd love to do something like that. Maybe I can win and I'm helping out the society at the same time. And you'd be amazed at the outreach that we have been getting from those of us that have reached out. Which leads me to the second point, that time is now absolutely of the essence. And I'm going to explain why. We got a check-in this week that was dated December 10th. So we can talk about what's been going on politically and why, but the mail service is absolutely antiquated and horrible right now. And we have to have the checks in our hands prior to the drawing on January 31st, because you could just imagine how much fun it would be to try to chase somebody down that says, hey, you still owe us some money, even though your name wasn't drawn in the raffle after the raffle's already over. So that's not going to work. So we have basically 2.5 weeks left to go to sell these and get the checks in. So I am begging and pleading all of you to say, all I hear is how wonderful our society is and how people embrace it and how important it is. But here's a chance for you to be able to say to your contacts, to your friends, yeah, it's important to me and it's important to Ridgewood and it's important to our community. So would you like to help us out here and maybe, buy a ticket or two and help us get this gap closed so that we can continue to have all our wonderful staff paid and our facilities operating. So that's it. That's my pitch. Just to let you all know, we will do the drawing immediately after the services on January 31st. And for those of you that have been participating, thank you so much. You guys are wonderful. Thanks.
We also want to let you know that our reproductive justice team invites everyone to a panel on January 24th, 3 p.m. via Zoom, that will address the upcoming New Jersey Reproductive Freedom Act. More details will be in the e-blast and on Realm. Please look for those. And finally, a quick reminder that we are collecting food and gently used or new coats this month. When you drop off food or coats on the hotspot of USR, Reeves Porch, please place items in the appropriately marked bags. And you've been so generous already. Please, let's keep it coming. And we are so glad that you are with us this morning.
And then just turn this thing.
We're the Rosengrides, and we'd like you to join us in lighting today's chalice.
We light this chalice for the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action as we gather together in the circle of community.
Please take a deep breath. Let yourself be present to this moment and to this community. Know that this gathering is strong enough to hold all that you bring today. Every emotion, every fear, every hope, every wayward thought. Breathe deeply into the power of this time together and try to be still. Take a deep breath. Our centering sound will ring out clear. Its tone, a bright clarion call to justice, to life, and to love. Listen. I've been thinking a lot this week about places. For the last 11 months, we have met outside of our congregational home. We've had to remember that our congregation isn't the building we meet in, that although our physical place feels like home and we miss it, in fact, the sacred stuff that happens even when we can't be together in person. My research in my doctoral program centered a lot on this, the relationship of religion and place, and how one of the most astonishing things that Christianity did was to make religion independent of place, allowing it to be exported all over the world. This week, we watched as our Capitol building was invaded by insurrectionists. There, they desecrated our national spaces, urinating on the floor, smearing fecal matter on the walls, breaking windows, stealing all manner of objects, and generally defacing this iconic building that we share. And I remember thinking on the day, even if they can't go back into that building, Congress can go somewhere to finish this job, to certify this election and our votes and make final this step in our process. I remember thinking the place isn't the thing. And yet, however independent the work and the place, however clearly I know that, still it hurt to watch because we imbue places with meaning and their integrity matters. This week, the Capitol building, but also our democracy, our nation itself, came under threat. It was made plain in undeniable ways that we have so much growth to do, that we have broken places that need healing. I found that I couldn't help thinking about the poem Good Bones by Maggie Smith. It contains one instance of profanity. I want to give you that warning, But for reasons that I hope will be clear, I have not altered the words for us this morning, and I want to share it with you now. So this is Good Bones by Maggie Smith. Life is short, and I've shortened mine in 1,000 delicious, ill-advised ways I'll keep from my children. The world is at least 50% terrible, and that's a conservative estimate, though I keep this from my children. For every bird, there is a stone thrown at a bird. For every loved child, a child broken, bagged, sunk in a lake. Life is short, and the world is at least half terrible, and for every kind stranger, there is one who would break you, though I keep this from my children. I'm trying to sell them the world. Any decent realtor walking you through a real shithole chirps on about good bones. This place could be beautiful, right? You could make this place beautiful. We gather this morning with the deepest shared hope that the bones are good enough and that we can make this place beautiful.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesty above the fruited plains. America, America, God shed her grace on thee, and crown thy good in neighborhoods from sea to shining sea.
Oh, beautiful for reason led, the founding of our rules, the balance of the power trumps the tyranny of fools. America, America, God mend thine every flaw, confirm thy soul in self-control, thy liberty in law.
Oh, beautiful, our open skies, how far our eyes do go. We crave a land unlimited by anyone's control. America, our liberty has blinded us with greed. Our bounty has deluded us to take more than we need.
How humbling that grace bestowed on our unworthy heads, when we, the people, turn our backs on families that fled.
America, our borders ache. Oh, let us find our soul. Unite the families torn apart, each broken heart be whole. Oh, beautiful to make amends for our abhorrent acts, our country built by labor forced on stolen lands and backs. America, repent for this, repair and say what's true. Let equity our promise be, declare these truths anew. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesty, above the fruited plains. America, America, God shed grace on thee, and crown thy neighborhoods from sea to shining sea.
We continue this morning with our stories of the Underground Railroad in New Jersey. If you watched the news this week, you surely saw reporters and others lift up the wild, offensive, shocking difference between how Black Lives Matter protests were handled and how this insurrection was handled. It is so important that we keep telling the stories of moments when people of all races stood on the right side of history, or, as we will hear today, on the wrong side of history. Last week, our story from the UGRR was about a white riot in Newark, how prescient sharing that story now seems. When we lose sight of what was and when we forget what humans are capable of, we are more vulnerable than ever. So please give your attention this morning to Marilyn and Kristen as they share our next stop on the Underground Railroad.
Welcome to the 7th presentation in our series of stories from the Underground Railroad in New Jersey. You could say that today's story is the Underground Railroad in reverse. It's not one of bravery or outstanding character, but one of villainy, subterfuge, and deception by white men of power. The Van Wickle slave ring of East Brunswick, New Jersey. Throughout this presentation, you'll hear the names of real people ensnared in this plot, some of the 180 people who have been identified by scholars and the Lost Memorial Project. We read these names in memory of the voiceless, to honor their spirit, and to use memory as an ongoing recognition of injustice.
Dinah, age 9. Dorcas, 1 year. George, 35. Rhoda, 14 years. William, 22.
We travel back to 1818. New Jersey was one of the last of the northern slaveholding states. Laws had been promulgated that called for the gradual emancipation, but these laws of gradualism still left many enslaved, and sometimes the enslaved walking side by side with free Blacks. The southern states desperately needed labor for their plantations, and slavery was gradually coming to an end in the North. Diabolical plans were made to capture Black persons, free or enslaved, and ship them by cargo boat to the South, many never to be heard from again. One such plan was hatched in what is now East Brunswick, New Jersey. The plot centered on Jacob Van Wickle and his brother-in-law, Charles Morgan, a Louisiana state legislator and plantation owner, with the help of other relatives and business associates. Van Wickle, a prominent judge and former freeholder from Middlesex County, convinced his brother-in-law to purchase enslaved people in New Jersey and sell them at much higher prices in Louisiana, where demand was great. An 1812 New Jersey law required a slave's consent to leave New Jersey, but entrusted the evaluation of this slave's consent to a member of the judiciary. Conveniently, in this case, Judge Van Wickle himself and his complicit cronies, who routinely lied to free victims to gain that consent, promising things like high wages or a return to New Jersey. Children as young as 2 days old were ensnared in the plot. Contemporaneous accounts even said that Van Wickle counted a 6-week-old infant's cries as an assent to a lifetime of enslavement. Van Wickle and Charles Morgan also scooped up people from city jails from as far away as Newark, New Jersey. If you saw the movie 12 Years a Slave, you saw even free Black people who were unable to prove their free status were routinely classified as runaways and imprisoned. To recoup the cost of imprisonment, government officials like New Jersey Governor Isaac H. William sold the imprisoned if their masters didn't claim them within 10 days. And Judge Jacob Van Wickle himself advanced funds to government officials to acquire these individuals. The captured Blacks, free or enslaved, were even housed at Van Wickle's own home, called the Slave Castle, living under guard until they could be shipped away. And just to keep the profits in the family, Van Wickle's son, Nicholas, became Morgan's purchasing agent. Eventually, public outrage garnered from newspaper reporting and shipping irregularities shed light on the scheme, and several participants were indicted. Judge Van Wickle himself, however, after launching his own PR campaign to proclaim his innocence, was never brought to trial and even appeared as a witness against his son-in-law, Charles Morgan, who was indicted for removing persons too young to give consent.
Rachel, age 22. Harvey, 22. Mary, age 2. Jonas, 16. Joseph, 2 days old.
In 1818, local citizens successfully petitioned the New Jersey legislature to end the practice of exporting people out of state and to enforce fines and or imprisonment against individuals engaged in selling, transferring, or assigning slaves or servants.
Susan Silvery, age 30. George Byram, 18. Susan Hager and her 3 children, Rhoda, Mary, and Augustus.
Now we fast forward to 2017, when Reverend Karen Johnston of the Unitarian Society, located in East Brunswick, learned the story of the Van Wickle slave ring and found that there was a street in East Brunswick named after the insidious plotter. She led her congregation and other community leaders to petition the governing body to change the street name and to establish a lasting memorial, creating the Lost Souls Memorial Project. Reverend Johnston calls unearthing this local history a form of reparations for injustice and the reading of the names of the lost as an act of liberatory memory. And the Nelson Mandela Foundation says, by exploring history and centering on untold stories of those harmed by injustice, we shape memory and contribute to a reckoning of past injustices and to the transformation of attitudes and a more just society. Please consider learning more about the Van Wickle slave ring and the Lost Souls Memorial Project through their website listed in the chat. You can support the Memorial Project's aim to place a permanent memorial as an act of liberatory memory. The Lost Souls Project explains their mission thus: tending to history, centering on those damaged, shaping memory while creating the possibility of liberation for all.
Nobody knows the troubles I've seen. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the troubles I've seen. Glory, hallelujah. Sometimes I'm up, sometimes I'm down. Oh, yes, Lord. Sometimes I'm almost to the ground. Oh, yes, Lord. Oh, nobody knows the troubles I've seen. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the troubles I've seen. Glory, hallelujah. If you give me before I do, oh yes, Lord, tell all of my friends I'm coming too. Oh yes, Lord. Oh, nobody knows the troubles I see. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the troubles I see. Glory, hallelujah.
Take a deep breath. Let your body sink into your seat. Let your feet find solidity on the floor. Take a deep breath, and as you exhale, feel the tension leave your shoulders, roll through your fingertips, and out into the earth. The solid and enduring earth. It can recycle that negative energy and bring forth beauty. Take a deep breath, and as you exhale, feel your feet, your core, your spine, all holding you, centering your body. So much has happened this week to trouble us and to give us hope. And so together this morning, as we breathe deeply, we both mourn and we offer gratitude. We mourn the events in our nation's capital, insurrection and violence that caused fear and anger, just as we began to hope for an end to the pandemic, for a new era in our political stage, and for a centering of marginalized voices. We mourn all of those who we lost to police violence. Extrajudicial killings are an outrage wherever they occur. And we hold hope that the institutions of our country will value life more dear in the coming year. We mourn all of those who are sick or caring for the sick. For as our political flames rise, our hospitals continue to fill with victims of this terrible disease. And our division has left us with less vaccine than we need and poor ways to distribute it. We live in troubled times which challenge our hearts, but which also call us closer together, and which demand that we live our values with courage. We are grateful to the floor staff who had the presence of mind to rescue our ballots from the chaos, to ensure that we were counted. They know how to take care of our house. We are grateful to all of those who return to work after such scary events, to clean the glass, debris, and urine after such turmoil, and to do the work of government so that democracy might stand another day. They know how to take care of our house. We are grateful to those who continue to tend to the sick and the dying, whether professionals or loved ones. They know how to take care of our house. Last Sunday, we talked of letting go of those things which hold us down and remembering to hold tight to that which brings forth the best in us. This Sunday, as every day, let us again remember what we must hold tight to. Let us remember that which buoys our spirit and clarifies our mind. We hold on to each other, for we value the lives of all creation. We hold on to the search for truth, for we believe that there are indeed enduring truths. We hold on to democratic practices, for we know they are the good bones of our political being. We hold on to our house, this earth and the glorious web of being which sustains us. As one, we breathe in deeply, slowly, and we exhale together in the spirit of our beloved community. May we hold our shared values in the face of whatever comes.
Our reading this morning was written by W.H. Auden on the eve of World War II. It's titled September 1st, 1939. I sit in one of the dives on 52nd Street, uncertain and afraid, as the clever hopes expire of a low, dishonest decade. Waves of anger and fear circulate over the bright and darkened lands of the earth, obsessing our private lives. The unmentionable odor of death offends the September night. Accurate scholarship can unearth the whole offense from Luther until now that has driven a culture mad. Find what occurred at Linz, what huge imago made a psychopathic God. I and the public know what all school children learn. Those to whom evil is done do evil in return. Exiled Thucydides knew that a speech can say about all that a speech can say about democracy and what dictators do. The elderly rubbish they talk to an apathetic grave. Analyzed all in his book, The Enlightenment Driven Away, the habit forming pain, mismanagement, and grief. We must suffer them all again. Into this neutral air where blind skyscrapers use their full height to proclaim the strength of collective man, each language pours its vain competitive excuse. But who can live for long in an euphoric dream? Out of the mirror they stare, imperialism's face and the international wrong. Faces along the bar cling to their average day. The lights must go out, the music must always play. All the conventions conspire to make this fort assume the furniture of home, lest we should see where we are, lost in a haunted wood, children afraid of the night, who have never been happy or good. The windiest militant trash important persons shout is not so crude as our wish. What Mad Nijinsky wrote about Diaghilev is true of the normal heart. For the error bred in the bone of each woman and each man craves what it cannot have. Not universal love, but to be loved alone. From the conservative dark into the ethical life, the dense commuters come, repeating their morning vow. I will be true to the wife. I'll concentrate more on my work. And helpless governors wake to resume their compulsory game. Who can release them now? Who can reach the deaf? Who can speak for the dumb? All I have is a voice to undo the folded lie. The romantic lie in the brain of the sensual man in the street and the lie of authority whose buildings grope the sky. There is no such thing as the state, and no one exists alone. Hunger allows no choice to the citizen or the police. We must love one another or die. Defenseless under the night, our world in stupor lies. Yet dotted everywhere, ironic points of light flash out wherever the just exchange their messages. May I, composed like them of eros and of dust, beleaguered by the same negation and despair, show an affirming flame. I need to say before I say anything else to you today in my sermon that I do not speak to you this morning in despair, though at some times it may seem so. I speak to you with some fear, yes, with a lot of righteous anger, yes, with knots in my stomach and with desperate desire for what comes next, yes. Yet I come to you this morning not in despair, but with resolute hope. This week, we witnessed an insurrection, a coup, a violent, though thankfully ill-planned siege on our nation's Capitol building, the first since the British attacked and burned the White House and the Capitol during the War of 1812. I imagine that you, like me, have felt many feelings throughout this week. There are so many pieces to this, it's hard to parse. But our work here together is to speak truths, to honor what is real and present in our lives, and to affirm for each other a way forward consistent with our values, and so parse we will. First, we must contend with the fact that the sitting president of the United States incited, encouraged, demanded this attack. Over 4 years ago, I remember preaching to my then congregation after the election of the current president. For months throughout the campaigning, I had been clear that although by law I could not as a minister speak to the candidates themselves, I could speak to the various issues at hand, and that many of those issues were not political, they were moral, they were foundational. For all the differences in Republicans and Democrats and any other party for that matter, traditionally, we knew that we shared a commitment to democracy, to this nation's historic and peaceful transfers of power begun when John Adams stepped aside in 1801 after losing to Thomas Jefferson. But 5 years ago, through long and painful months of election coverage, it became clear that any notion of truth, of decency, of tradition, or democracy was at grave risk depending on how this nation voted. There was nothing surprising about what happened on Wednesday. Not really. There was nothing that many didn't predict, nothing that we could not have seen coming, given the cult of personality that exists around the current president, and given his penchant for inciting anger, violence, and self-righteousness based on lies. Just yesterday, I was reminded of a quote from Hannah Arendt, who wrote, "It would be a still more serious mistake to forget that the totalitarian regimes, so long as they are in power, and the totalitarian leaders, so long as they are alive, command and rest upon mass support up to the end. Nor can their popularity be attributed to the victory of masterful and lying propaganda over ignorance and stupidity. For propaganda of totalitarian movements which precede and accompany totalitarian regimes is invariably as frank as it is mendacious. And would-be totalitarian rulers usually start their careers by boasting of their past crimes and carefully outlining their future ones. From day one, anyone listening knew what might be possible because we were being told by the complicit parties themselves. And yet, though I wasn't surprised, I was sad that indeed it had come to this. And I found myself scared at how easily a demagogue with pretensions to power had ascended. And I was so grateful, really, that the incompetence of both leader and followers meant that the military wasn't on board, that there was no organization at work that allowed for more damage to be done. And I am left with a deep and enraged frustration that even now, we allow the current president to continue in that role. We must also face that those who stormed the Capitol were funded, supported, encouraged by institutional Republicans, by lawmakers who were in that very building, by police officers and other law enforcement agencies, and that among those officers and agents of the law were people who, it seems at the moment, not only didn't put up much resistance to these insurrectionists, but actually facilitated their entry into the hallowed walls of government. What does it mean when the core of one of our two major parties has turned its back on peaceful transfers of power, has thrown out fact and evidence, and has embraced conspiracy and violence? What does it mean when so many in our government place personal position and power above country and democracy? I suspect the election of such people is the result of a culture that privileges the individual over the collective. I suspect they are simply a reflection of the cultural trends we have too long ignored, trends toward greed and power. Over the weeks that come, we will find ourselves again and again forced to reckon with the truth of who was involved and why. Already we know that in addition to elected leaders, party leaders, law enforcement personnel, there were among those who besieged our nation's seat of government, those who claimed to be spiritual leaders. I'm sure you saw pictures of the self-proclaimed shaman in the fur and horns, co-opting Norse imagery and pretending to spiritual leadership. As you might imagine, I have many thoughts about this particular player in last week's events. Among those thoughts, that spiritual leadership is not something one can declare for oneself. It is earned in the context of community. And even then, true spiritual leadership seeks truth, reality, connection, depth, and not conspiracy. The practical philosopher, researcher, and writer Jules Evans wrote this in a recent piece delving into the identity of that conspiracy shaman. Evans wrote, "The conspiracy problem arises out of deeper problems: mental illness, trauma, loneliness, bad education, and weak critical thinking skills, toxic cultures in both Christianity and New Age spirituality, social media algorithms, and a breakdown of agreed meanings and truths in Western and global society." Evans has written before on what he terms conspirituality, the intersection of spirituality and conspiracy theory. We have a serious problem in this country, aided by the internet, egged on by charismatic narcissists, and we have to find a way to reach those who get sucked in by this distorted version of spirituality, those who get sucked in by conspiracy theories, and those who manipulate the mentally, emotionally, or spiritually vulnerable for their own gain. We are in some senses dealing with a cult of vast proportions, one that, like other cults, eschews facts, blindly follows a beloved leader who calls them special and avers a love for them, all while willing to sacrifice them. And this is a cult like others that will regroup after its initial failure. We have work to do in renewing our commitment to education, to regulating online spaces, and to filling what emptiness or anger exists in people's lives that they turn to this kind of propaganda and lie as if it can make them whole. We have so much work to do against the disaffection that leads people to believe that sharing in this supposedly secret knowledge makes them important or better or special. I felt such sorrow and such anger this week watching the leaders of this glorified cult, both the elected ones and the self-declared ones. And I am left with a weariness when I consider all the work that it will take to undo years of disinformation designed to harm. We must also face the unsurprising, but always deeply disturbing truth that behind the veil of proclaimed patriotism is thinly veiled, if veiled at all, racism. Around the grounds of the Capitol, a gallows was built from which a noose hung. Other insurrectionists carried nooses. And this is no neutral symbol in this country. It's a symbol of racism, of violence, of centuries of trauma visited on Black and brown bodies. No one can have failed to see, too, that the flags that were flown in the name of patriotism were flags with the name of a would-be despot and the flag of the failed insurrectionist pro-slavery would-be nation of the Confederacy. Racism and white supremacy were on full display this week. Anyone who watched the news this week also cannot have escaped the comparison between the security that was put in place for our Congress this past Wednesday and the security that was put in place for the Black Lives Matter protests this summer. Wednesday, was a smattering of Capitol Police officers, some of whom were taking selfies with the insurrectionists. For the Black Lives Matter protests, peaceful protests, there were ranks of military and police in full riot gear. Anyone with eyes and a thinking mind cannot escape the truth that during Black Lives Matter protests, the purpose of which was and is to gain the smallest semblance of equality and justice in this country that for centuries has been categorically denied in law and in deed, to the value of Black and brown lives. At those protests, hundreds were arrested. And here, during protests designed to halt and reverse our established fair and free democratic processes, just around a dozen folks were arrested. Images abound of these white supremacist rioting seditionists being aided by police, escorted off the grounds and let go in spite of having been armed with explosives and zip ties and weapons. If you needed any more proof that racism is among the founding sins of this country and that we have so much healing and atonement to do, there it is. Right there in full Instagram color for all the world to see. Our racism is baked in, and the images of this week of white power bullshit left me so angry. So angry. I can't even begin to imagine the harm those images must have done to our Black and brown American siblings who have always and still know deeply every day the horrors of American racism. And I am left with so much righteous fury for all of us, because as I have said over and over, and I will say until my breath is gone, our racist system impoverishes all of our souls. And until we can make real change, we are all complicit. We also have to face that right alongside those racist signs and symbols were the signs and symbols of neo-Nazi anti-Semitism. A sweatshirt with the words Camp Auschwitz. Another shirt with the numbers and letters 6MNE. I had never seen this. It means 6 million was not enough. That left me speechless. My family fled Russia during the pogroms of the early 20th century, finding safety here in this country and escaping the unimaginable horror of the genocide of World War II. But they say that trauma lives in our DNA, that those of us whose people have had to flee, whose people have suffered attempted extermination or centuries of trauma, that we carry those memories programmed into our very beings, that we live and love and trust and believe in ways that are impacted by those bone deep truths. The folks who stormed the Capitol displayed brazen and blatant symbols of anti-Semitism that tear right at the wounds of Jewish people around the world. This reminder that perpetual evil lives waiting. That reminder invokes a deep fear, if also a deep resolve, forged through trauma and grief. That passage from Hannah Arendt continues. The Nazis were convinced that evildoing in our time has a morbid force of attraction. The attraction of evil and crime for the mob mentality is nothing new. And again, there's no surprise. Certainly most Jews, most medievalists like me, and most general students of history would tell you that anti-Semitism has lived and thrived for millennia, in large part buoyed by distortions of Christianity that proclaim Jews at best the ignorant uninitiated, and at worst the enemy that killed their savior. The end of World War II didn't end anti-Semitism, and it was right there in all our faces this past Wednesday. I felt, again, sorrow at the unbelievable way that evil is entrenched. Fear at the breath of hatred on display. And still, I am left with resolute hope. Honestly, this list of horrors we must face as a nation probably barely scratches the surface. I've almost certainly forgotten some aspect. But even with this, we are left with some hard truths. Too many in this nation are at great risk of manipulation and indoctrination into cult-like conspiracy theories masquerading as knowledge and spirituality. Racism, anti-Semitism, and so many other hatreds and oppressions are alive and well, and we are doing too little, too late to counter them in a meaningful way. All our notions that America and American democracy are special, different, invulnerable, better than those shithole countries over there, that has all been proven wrong, though thankfully without an actual dismantling of democracy just yet. And if we don't make drastic changes soon, we will find ourselves over and over in this same situation, only the threat will become more organized, more prepared, more visionary, and more successful. Olas and I spoke late this week. As we talked about all that had happened, Olas pointed out that we as a nation have somehow forgotten that vigilance against tyranny is among the most necessary acts of democracy. When I was young, I found Thomas Jefferson fascinating. I read biographies about him in middle school. For all his many, many flaws, he could turn a phrase. And the ideals he held, when they were applied to all people of any gender or race, they are truly ideals to live by. Around the top of the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. is the inscription, "I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." Too many among us have become confused about what tyranny is and about what truth is. And this is where it all gets so damn complicated. Those who stormed the Capitol with their racism and bigotry and violence, many of them believe they are the righteous ones, the ones saving democracy. I know it's hard to fathom, but they believe the threat of tyranny is the left and its evil doing. They don't believe themselves to be caught in the throes of a charismatic tyrant. And for me, that is where despair starts to creep in. How do we deprogram millions of Americans? How do we deprogram their prejudices, free them from the manipulative tyranny of lies, teach them to think critically, fill their lives with something else so that evil doesn't step into the vacuum of dissatisfaction and a lack of purpose? The despair creeps in because my privileged white self wants an answer, wants to be able to control what happens next, wants to be able to fix all of it. It's what I'm used to. And despair creeps in because I know that I can't. But just because I cannot make all of it whole, that doesn't mean I am without power. I can tell stories, recount the truths of history that teach us to fear tyranny and work vigilantly against it. I can do that human work of aiding our collective memory so that we do not repeat the tragedies of the past. I can advocate for new curricula, read books, support films that speak the real stories of Black and brown bodies, that speak the real stories of the indigenous people of this country, that tell the truth, no matter how hard it is to hear. I can be part of movements for change, movements against racism and anti-Semitism, movements to reunite families and to open our borders, movements to secure democracy and a vote for all that isn't infringed on by gerrymandering and vote suppression. I can use my time and my voice and my money to support protests that work toward the American dream as I believe it can be. I can be part of a much needed culture change that will have political ramifications. I can demand in my life and with my vote that we begin again to understand deeply community, our interdependence, our commitment to each other. Auden wrote back in 1939, "We must love one another or die." How true this still is. I can raise my voice to proclaim loudly my deeply held belief in our shared humanity and in the power of love to restore wholeness for all of us. I can hold tightly to hope, not naive, but active hope, that proclaims that for all its failures and false starts and deep wounds and soul-wrenching sins, America has some good bones. If we can strip back to the ideals hidden and obscured by centuries of wrongful interpretation, we can build something beautiful. I can work hard to remember that, because in remembering that, I will find the strength to keep working for change. And I can use every moment, every opportunity I have to, in Auden's words again, show an affirming flame. Because in amongst all of this, in all the horror and the pain, in the anger and frustration and fear, aides remembered to bring out the boxes that contained our ballots. Congresspeople went back to the site of trauma and did what needed to be done. Folks got on their hands and knees and cleaned those hallowed walls. Auden wrote on the eve of World War II, "Defenseless under the night, our world in stupor lies, yet dotted everywhere. Ironic points of light flash out wherever the just exchange their messages. May I, composed like them of eros and of dust, beleaguered by the same negation and despair, show an affirming flame. Ever and always, I can find in memory and in history, in my heart and in my beliefs, a wellspring of strength to keep on working for what is right, taking care of my house, my communities, taking care of this world we share."
Good morning. My name is Robert Markowitz, and I'm the Vice President of the Board of Trustees. Part of laying the groundwork for the future of our congregation is making our weekly offering that helps to sustain the work of our community. We know that we benefit from those who have gone before, generations of folks just like us who believed in community, in justice, in transformation, and in the healing power of love. They gave so that we might today belong to and build this supportive and sustaining community. Generations after us will still need to fight for liberation and equality for all. They will still need to provide their children with experiences that help them grow into themselves. They will still need a place to go to be reminded of their highest aspirations and affirmed in their wholeness. Our giving now ensures the future of this congregation for years to come. This community exists because of you and will survive because of you, your passion, your time, your talents, and also your donations. Whatever you're able to give, we're thankful for your generosity. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Will you build me a house that really will be mine? Then let me give you my design, a simple scheme of the house I dream of. Build my house of wood, build my house of stone, build my house of brick and mortar. Make the ceiling strong, strong against the storm, shelter when the days grow shorter. But build my house of love and paint my house with trusting and warm it with the warmth of your heart. Make the floor of faith, make the walls of truth, put a roof of peace above. Only build my house of love. Take care of this house, keep it from harm. If bandits break in, for this house. Shine it by hand and keep it so clean the glow can be seen all over the land. Be careful at night, check all the doors. If someone makes off with a dream, the dream will be yours. Take care of this house, be always on call. Care for this house, it's the hope of us all. Take care of this house, keep it from harm. If bandits break in, sound the alarm. Care for this house, shine it by hand and keep it so clean the glow can be seen all over the land. Be careful at night, check all the doors. If someone makes off with a dream, the dream will be yours. Take care of this house, be always on call. Care for this house, it's the hope of us
Every Sunday, we light our chalice together. This symbol of Unitarian Universalism was born in the thick of World War II as members of the Unitarian Service Committee worked to bring Jews out of danger. We sometimes take for granted this singular symbol of our shared commitment. Our chalice is a symbol of the affirming flame in each of us. It's a symbol of the house we share, the community we build, the congregation we are. And it's a symbol of the hope that outshines all despair, of the love that overpowers all hate, of the determination that outlives all doubt. May we take steps each day to realize the promise of these good bones, however deeply buried they are. And together, may we build something beautiful. So may it be.
Please join us in our closing hymn, I Know I Can, number 1015. Though days be dark with storms and burdens weigh my heart, the trouble laid at every turn, I know I can Please join us in the words for extinguishing the chalice. They can be found on your screen. We extinguish the flame, but may the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action burn bright in our hearts until we are together again.
Thank you all for being with us this morning. I will quickly alter our settings so you can greet one another.